The morning I said the word out loud, there was no thunder. No door slammed. My mother-in-law was standing at my kitchen sink, washing a single cup, and she did not turn around. I said it quietly. I said, "I want a divorce." She set the cup down, dried her hands, folded the cloth exactly as she always did, and then she walked out of my house without speaking a word to me. That silence was not an accident. That silence was the answer. I did not understand yet what I had done. I did not understand yet what I had started. My name is Hannah. I was raised Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio. I married at 19. I left at 28. What I am about to tell you took me years to fully understand, and I want to be careful about how I say it, because the Amish are not one thing, and not every district is the same. But what happens when an Amish woman asks for a divorce? That is something I lived through. And there are things that happened that most people on the outside have never heard. If this is the first time you've found this channel, welcome. Subscribe now if you want to hear the stories that rarely get spoken. The bell icon means you'll be here when the next one goes up. First, I need to explain something. In the Amish world I came from, marriage is not a contract between two people. It is a covenant before God, witnessed by the church, embedded in a structure called the Ordnung, the unwritten code that governs everything from dress to land to silence. There is no word in the Ordnung for divorce. That is not a metaphor. The word does not exist as a possibility. It is not listed as forbidden the way worldly music is forbidden, or as electricity is forbidden. It is simply not there. As if a woman asking for it would be asking for a color that does not exist in the known spectrum. I want to be exact about this. Divorce is not merely disapproved of. It is treated as a category error, like asking to breathe water. The system does not prepare a punishment because the system does not believe the request can be made by a woman who properly understands her place. My husband Elam was considered a good man, and in many ways that was true. He worked hard, he did not drink, he provided. He was respected by the church elders and liked by the men in our community. I want to say that plainly, because what I am describing is not a story about one cruel man. It is a story about what happens to a woman inside a system, even when the man is not cruel. We had 4 children. We had a working farm. We had a life that looked from the outside like everything it was supposed to be. But there is a kind of loneliness that can live inside a full house, and there is a kind of harm that does not leave a mark anyone can see. By year 7, I had begun to understand that I was not a wife in the sense I had privately hoped. I was a function. I was the woman who managed the house and the children and presented a smooth face to the church. And when I tried to really speak, the room went quiet in a particular way. A way I had learned to read, that silence meant, do not continue. I did not arrive at the word divorce quickly. I want you to understand that. I spent nearly 2 years trying everything the system offered me first. I spoke to my mother. She said, "Pray harder." I spoke to the bishop's wife carefully in coded language, the way women there learn to speak. She said, "A good wife makes a good marriage." I spoke eventually to the bishop himself. I will come back to what he said, because that conversation is the part that changed everything. But the morning I said the word to my mother-in-law, I had been awake since 2. I had read the same passage in my Bible 4 times and felt nothing. And something in me that had been holding itself very still for a very long time finally went quiet in a different way. Not defeated, just decided. What followed was not dramatic. That is the part I need you to understand. It was not shouting. It was not threats. It was not a confrontation. It was a gradual removal of warmth. My sister-in-law stopped stopping by. She had come every Tuesday for 6 years to help with canning. Tuesday came and went. No knock, no explanation at church. Women I had known since childhood greeted me differently. Not coldly, that would have been something I could name. It was more like a careful friendliness. The kind of friendliness that does not reach the eyes. The kind that says, "We know what you have said, and we are waiting to see if you will take it back." The deacon's wife came to our house one afternoon. She sat across from me at my own kitchen table and said, "Hannah, you know that our community holds marriage as sacred. You would not want to be the woman who broke that." She said it kindly. "That is what I need you to hear." She said it like a warning spoken out of love. I have a word for it now. I did not have it then. The word is coercion. The bishop in our district was a man named Jonas. He had known me since I was a girl. He had given the sermon at my wedding. When I sat across from him and said carefully, quietly, that I was not happy in my marriage and I wanted to know what my options were, he looked at me for a long time before he spoke. He said, "Hannah, a wife's happiness is not the measure God uses." He said it gently. He believed it completely. He was not a monster. He was a man who had inherited a system and had never once been asked to question it. He told me that divorce was not available to me, that if I were to pursue separation, I would be subject to the maidang, the shunning. that my children would be raised with an understanding of what I had done, that my family would be required to limit their contact with me. He told me he would pray for me. I walked home on a road I had walked 1,000 times. The horses in the field were the same. The sky was the same. But I understood, for the first time, that the bishop was not a door out, he was another lock. Let me explain what divorce means in practical terms inside an old order community, because the outside world does not understand this. Civil divorce, a legal divorce, is technically possible. You can file in an Ohio courthouse. The state does not care about the ordnung, but the community cares. If a woman files for civil divorce without the church's approval, and the church does not grant approval, because the framework does not allow for it, she faces the Maidung. Shunning is not simply social avoidance. In a strict old order community, shunning means your husband cannot eat at the same table as you. Your parents are required to limit meaningful contact. Your children, depending on their age and the bishop's instruction, may be steered away from you. Your entire social world, every relationship you have ever had, every person who has ever loved you, becomes conditional on whether you return. For a woman who has never held a bank account, who has no driver's license, who has no high school diploma, who has no address outside the community, shunning is not a spiritual consequence. It is a material one. It is the removal of every practical resource you have. That is not accidental. I understand now that it was never accidental. In the months after I said the word, 3 things happened. First, Elam was counseled by the elders. I was not present for this. I learned about it the way women in our community learned most things, through the careful, indirect speech of other women. Through what was not said at dinner, through a particular way my husband's shoulders changed when he came home. Second, my mother came to stay with us for 3 weeks. She did not say she was there to watch me. She said she was there to help with the children, but she spoke to me every day in a low, constant way, not angry, not threatening, patient. Reminding me of what I had, reminding me of what I would lose. Reminding me that the women who left were not happy, they were alone. They were cut off, they were sorry. Third, a woman I will call Ruth came to find me. Ruth was in her 60s. She had been married 40 years. She was considered a pillar of the community. She came to my house on an afternoon when no one else was there, and she helped me hang laundry without being asked. We worked side by side for a long time without speaking. And then she said without looking at me, I know a woman in Millersburg. She helps women who need to start over. She is not Amish, but she is trustworthy. I am telling you this because I was once where you're standing. She did not say anything else. She went inside, drank a glass of water, and left. I stood at the clothesline for a long time after she was gone. That sentence was the only honest thing anyone said to me in those 6 months. I will not describe leaving in detail in this video, that belongs to another chapter, and I want to give it the full space it deserves. What I will tell you is this. I left on a Tuesday in November. I had a bag. I had a small amount of money I had set aside over 8 months, hidden in a place I will not name, because there are women still in houses where that information matters. I had 3 phone numbers written in pencil on the inside of a Bible. One was Ruth's contact in Millersburg. One was a women's shelter 2 counties away. One was an organization that helps people leave insular religious communities. I left before my children were awake. That was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. It was also the only way I could survive long enough to fight for them later. And I did fight for them. That story, the custody, the court, the church pressure on the proceedings, that is a long story, and it is coming. I began seeing a therapist 8 months after I left. Her name does not matter. What matters is that she was the first person who listened to everything I described, the shunning, the bishop, my mother's patient weeks of persuasion, the removal of warmth from the house 1 piece at a time, and she said, Hannah, what you are describing is a coercive control system. Every element you have named, the financial dependence, the social isolation, the community enforcement, the removal of resources as punishment, these are documented mechanisms. They do not require individual cruelty. They require a structure, and you were living inside that structure. I sat with that sentence for a very long time. The system is the thing, not the people. I want to be careful here. Jonas the bishop was not a malicious man. He was a man who had received a theology that told him women's happiness was not the measure. He passed it on because it was all he had ever been given. Elam was not a monster. He was a man who had been told from birth that headship was his right and his responsibility. He exercised what he had been given. My mother was not my enemy. She was a woman who had survived the same system by not naming it, and who was trying, in the only way she knew, to help me survive it too. The mistake was the framework, not the people. That is not an excuse. Explanation is not excuse, but understanding the architecture is the only way to stop it from being rebuilt. What I have described today is an Amish story. But I want to speak directly to you now, wherever you are. If you have ever been told that leaving your marriage would cost you everything, your family, your community, your children, your sense of who you are, then you know something of what I'm describing. If the word divorce has ever felt like something you were not permitted to speak, if saying it out loud felt like asking for a color that doesn't exist, then you know. If you said it and the room went quiet in a particular way, and you learned from that silence to stop saying it, then this story is for you too. You were not wrong to want out. You were not weak. The framework was wrong, not you. I want to name Ruth. Not her real name, she is still in that community, and I will not bring difficulty to her door. But Ruth, if you somehow hear this, you handed me a sentence when I had none. That sentence became a road. I walked it. There are women like Ruth inside every closed system, women who know the truth but have learned to speak it sideways. If you are one of them, I see you too. Divorce is not a word the Ordnung contains, but freedom does not require the Ordnung's permission. The word was mine to say. Your words are yours. If you stayed through this whole story, thank you for witnessing it. Leave me a comment. What stayed with you? Or if you have your own story of a door that turned out to be a lock, you can share as much or as little as you want. I read everything. Subscribe for more stories from behind the prayer cap. The next video is the one I promised. What happened in the courthouse? I'll see you there.